The wind outside brushed gently against the windows of Riverbend Animal Haven, a quiet rescue shelter nestled in the suburbs. Morning light filtered through the dusty panes, casting soft shadows on the tiled floors. Somewhere in the back kennels, hidden behind rows of barking, excited dogs, was a German shepherd named Shadow. He didn't bark, he didn't wag his tail, he simply watched from the darkest corner of his kennel, his amber eyes weary and still. Shadow had arrived 3 weeks ago, found wandering near a construction site, limping and bruised, with thin scars tracing his ribs and legs. The volunteers didn't know much about him, but they didn't need to. His body told a story of hardship and pain, and the way he flinched when anyone came close said more than words ever could. They called him Shadow not only because of his smoky gray coat, but because of the way he vanished from every hand, every kind voice. No matter what the staff tried, treats, toys, patient hours sitting beside his kennel, Shadow refused to trust. The training sessions were too much for him. The loud whistles, sharp commands, and timed obstacle drills all felt like punishment. While other dogs leapt over hurdles or sat on cue, Shadow stumbled, froze, and flinched. He wasn't lazy, he was terrified, and with each failed attempt, a new scrape appeared on his legs, another bruise on his ribs. Every session left him more withdrawn, more convinced that he would never belong here. He wasn't aggressive, he was afraid, deeply afraid. Some thought he'd never come around, that maybe this one was too broken. But still, every morning, a volunteer would leave a bowl of food by his door. Every evening, someone would whisper a gentle good night, and Shadow stayed in the shadows. He didn't know it yet, but change was coming, and it would arrive not in the form of a trainer or leash, but in a 12-year-old girl with quiet eyes and her own story of scars. Emily Morgan used to dance. She was only 7 when her parents signed her up for ballet classes, hopeful she'd discover something special in herself. But ballet wasn't something she naturally understood. It hurt her legs, her feet, her pride. The positions were foreign, the routines exhausting, and when her instructor told her she had no real talent, the words sank deep into her chest like a quiet bruise. But Emily had something no one could measure in talent: determination. She stayed after class every day, practicing alone while her mom waited in the car with a warm drink and quiet encouragement. Slowly, painfully, her body began to learn. Her movements grew fluid. 2 years later, she wasn't just good, she was one of the best in her school. Applause followed her recital. Teachers smiled when she entered the room. Emily had found her rhythm, her identity, her purpose. Until the accident. It happened just after her 10th birthday, a fall, a fracture, and a long silence that followed, one that no music could break. Doctors said she'd recover, but the damage to her leg meant ballet was no longer possible. Overnight, Emily's world shrank. No more studio, no more rehearsals, no more stage, and the girl who once danced with fire in her eyes now moved through the world on wheels, quiet and uncertain. Her parents tried everything: tutors, therapy, even new hobbies, but nothing reached her. Not until her therapist suggested something unexpected: time with animals. Maybe connection could begin not with performance, but with presence. And so, one chilly morning, Emily was wheeled through the gates of Riverbend Animal Haven. She didn't know what to expect. All she knew was that she didn't want to be there. Emily rolled past 3 rows of kennels without looking up. The dogs barked, tails thumped, paws scratched at the gates, but she didn't stop. Not until she reached the farthest corner of the yard, where one small gray German shepherd lay alone. Shadow. He wasn't barking like the others. He wasn't wagging his tail. He lay with his head on his paws, ears tilted back, body curled into himself like he was trying to disappear. His fur was dull, marked with small scabs, and his eyes, they weren't angry, just tired, wary, afraid. Something in Emily paused. She asked softly, "What's his name?" A volunteer glanced over. "That's Shadow. He doesn't like people much." Emily didn't say anything. She simply stared, not at his injuries, but at his posture, his distance. It was too familiar. She had seen it before. She had seen it in the mirror. That afternoon, she watched from her chair as Shadow was taken to a training session. The whistle blew and the barking began. Commands were sharp, routines strict. Shadow tried to follow but stumbled, bumped into cones, froze mid-step. By the end, he had a new scratch on his front leg and a look of utter defeat. Emily clenched her hands. She remembered what it was like 5 years ago, when she had started ballet. Her body was stiff, her balance poor, her confidence non-existent. Each class felt like a battlefield, each correction, a wound. She remembered crying silently after practice, bruises on her ankles, her teacher's voice echoing, "You just don't have it." And yet, she'd kept going. Watching Shadow struggle, something ignited in her, that pain, that fight, that familiar silence. In him, she saw herself. And right then, for the first time in a long while, Emily wanted something, not for herself, but for someone else. She wanted to help Shadow heal. That evening, Emily sat at the dinner table, quiet as always, until she put down her fork and said, "I want to train a dog." Her parents looked at her in surprise. "There's a program at the shelter," she continued, her voice steady. "They let volunteers work with dogs for 6 months. I want to apply. I want to work with Shadow." There was a long pause. Her mother spoke first. "Honey, that's a big commitment." "I know." Her father leaned forward. "He's not like the other dogs, Em. He's been through a lot. What if it's too much for you?" Emily didn't blink. "Then I'll go slow. I don't want to change him overnight. I just want to try." Later that week, Emily's mother helped her fill out the application form. It required a signature, a short statement, and a commitment to attend 3 days a week. The shelter's staff reviewed her request with concern. Shadow had already been labeled a low-potential case. Some of the trainers whispered that it was cruel to give Emily false hope. They were afraid that if Shadow didn't improve, Emily's heart would break all over again. But the girl who sat in that chair was not the same girl who had rolled into the shelter in silence. She had seen Shadow's eyes. She knew that look, the fear of not being good enough, of falling behind, of not being chosen. She had lived that look for years. She didn't need Shadow to become perfect. She just wanted to give him a chance, the same kind of chance someone had once given her. The first week, Emily didn't teach Shadow anything. She didn't give commands, didn't bring treats, didn't expect results. She simply showed up, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Her mother wheeled her to the back corner of the shelter yard, where Shadow was led into a quiet, enclosed area. Emily would park her chair nearby and wait. Sometimes she read aloud. Sometimes she hummed old ballet music under her breath. Mostly, she just sat in silence, letting him get used to her presence. At first, Shadow stayed far away. He sniffed the fence line, paced the edges, never looking her in the eye. But he didn't bolt. That, to Emily, was enough. The second week, he came closer. One day, without meaning to, Emily dropped a small towel from her lap. It fluttered to the ground. Shadow flinched but didn't run. Instead, he stepped forward, hesitated, then nudged it with his nose. Emily didn't cheer or call him over. She just smiled and whispered, "That's okay. Good job." It became their rhythm. No pressure, no tests, just quiet moments. Emily brought soft brushes and gently ran them through his tangled fur. She gave him space when he needed it, and when he trembled, she didn't pull him closer. She simply waited until he found his way back. By the end of the first month, Shadow had begun to follow Emily's chair, not out of obedience, but curiosity. He learned to walk beside her in silence, to sit when she paused, to lean into her leg gently as if to say, "I'm still here." Other trainers watched from afar, puzzled. No clickers, no treats, no stern voices, and yet, Shadow was changing. Not fast, not dramatic, but real. And Emily was changing, too. She no longer dreaded mornings. She asked to go early, to stay longer. Her laughter, once missing, returned in soft bursts as she watched Shadow do something small but new. Sniff a flower, chase a butterfly, nuzzle her hand. They were both healing, but neither of them knew it yet. By the middle of the third month, people began to notice. Shadow now walked beside Emily without hesitation. He no longer flinched at passing dogs or ducked when someone clapped nearby. His ears perked up more often. His steps grew steadier. He still didn't like loud noises or sudden movements, but he wasn't afraid of them anymore. What surprised the staff most wasn't just Shadow's transformation, it was how it had happened. There were no traditional methods involved, no whistles, no strict routines. Emily didn't track his behavior on charts or mark progress on whiteboards. Her tools weren't commands or treats. They were patience, presence, and the quiet understanding of what it means to be afraid. Her reward system was a soft voice. A hand rested lightly on fur, the kind of trust that can't be rushed. "He's not trained," one trainer whispered once, watching Shadow calmly rest his head on Emily's lap. "He just believes in her." And it was true. Shadow had found safety in a place no one expected, beside a girl in a wheelchair who once felt just as unseen. For Emily, progress wasn't about teaching Shadow tricks. It was about helping him reclaim parts of himself: courage, curiosity, and the quiet joy of being near someone who didn't expect perfection. And in that same process, Emily was reclaiming something too. Her therapist noticed the change before she did. Emily talked more. She smiled more. She began asking questions about animal behavior, reading books on training techniques. The girl who once dreaded leaving the house now counted down the days until her next session. Her mother started packing her lunches with little notes that read, "So proud of you." Emily no longer spoke about dancing, not out of sadness, but because something new had begun to grow in its place. Shadow had started to lift his head higher, and so had she. By the end of the third month, something shifted. Shadow, once the dog who cowered at every step, now stood taller. He walked beside Emily not just out of comfort, but with a calm confidence that hadn't been there before. His eyes, once clouded with fear, now held focus, curiosity, even trust. The other volunteers noticed. Some stopped to watch as he weaved through cones without stumbling, responding to Emily's quiet gestures as if they shared a language no one else could hear. No leash, no commands, only rhythm and flow. For the first time, Shadow wasn't just surviving, he was shining. Emily felt it too. There was something different in the way she rolled her chair now, purposeful, steady. She looked forward to her sessions, not just because of Shadow, but because of the girl she became when she was with him. Patient, strong, proud. "I didn't think he'd come this far," one trainer admitted as he watched them work. "But I didn't think she would either." That comment stayed with Emily. She realized it wasn't just Shadow who had changed, she had too. Every morning now, she woke up with a goal. She stretched a little longer, smiled a little sooner, and most days, she didn't feel like the girl who used to dance. She just felt like Emily, the girl who helped a forgotten dog believe in himself. And in doing so, she had started to believe in herself again. The shelter's annual training showcase was approaching, a public event where volunteers demonstrated what the dogs had learned. Families, local press, and trainers from other cities would be watching. Emily had known about the event but never expected to be part of it. Shadow wasn't flashy. He didn't perform tricks or respond to voice commands. But when the staff quietly invited her to enter the exhibition, something inside her whispered, "You're ready." "He's ready." And she said, "Yes." On the day of the event, the yard was transformed. Tents lined the fence, banners waved in the breeze, and music floated over the speakers. Emily sat near the gate, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Shadow rested beside her, calm as ever, his head against her leg. They were scheduled last. A quiet finish, one trainer had said. Emily watched other dogs leap through hoops, weave between poles, roll, fetch, bark on command. Applause erupted for each one. They were confident, well-trained, sharp. Shadow, by comparison, seemed simple, gentle, still. But when their turn came, Emily took a breath and nodded to the handler at the gate. Shadow rose and walked beside her. No leash, no push. They began their routine. It wasn't a performance, it was a story. Shadow followed her through cones, paused when she did, made eye contact when she whispered. When a loud cheer startled him, he stopped, looked to Emily, then continued. Every step was quiet, every gesture filled with trust. When they finished, there was no roar of applause, just silence, then a slow, rising wave of clapping that grew and grew. Emily didn't cry. She didn't need to. Shadow had done more than just complete the routine. He had proven to everyone watching, and maybe most of all to himself, that he was more than what they'd once believed. After the applause faded and the crowd began to disperse, Emily sat quietly with Shadow in the shade of an old oak tree. There were no ribbons, no trophies, but that didn't matter. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about what she had lost. She was thinking about what she had found. Shadow lay beside her, his breathing slow and steady. His body was no longer tense. His tail thumped gently against the grass. Emily ran her fingers through his fur and whispered, "You did it." And so did she. That evening, as they drove home, Emily looked out the window and said softly, "I don't miss dancing." Her mother glanced over, surprised. "You don't?" Emily shook her head. "I thought that was the only thing that made me, but maybe I was wrong." Her mom smiled. "You've always been more than one dream." Emily didn't say anything at first. Then she asked, "Do you think I could be a real dog trainer? Like, for life?" Her mom reached over and squeezed her hand. "I think you already are." From that moment on, Emily stopped looking back. Her dream hadn't died, it had transformed. From leotards to leashes, from stage lights to healing hearts, from performance to purpose. And every time she walked beside Shadow, or helped another frightened dog take its first brave step, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Years passed. Emily grew, and so did Shadow. Slower now, a little gray around the muzzle, but still with that same steady loyalty in his eyes. Emily became a certified dog trainer, working with rescues across the state, helping animals others had given up on. People called her the girl with the calm voice, the one who sat for hours beside a dog that wouldn't look up, until one day it did. Shadow remained by her side through it all, her first client, her first success, her quiet reminder of how far they'd come. One afternoon, Emily spoke to a group of young kids in wheelchairs. She told them her story, not about loss, but about change. "We don't always get to keep the dreams we started with," she said, "but we get to choose new ones, and sometimes they're even better." She paused, looking down at Shadow resting at her feet. "This is the only life we have. Don't let sadness waste it. There's always another path, another dream, and someone, or something, waiting to walk it with you."
If this tale moved you, if you felt the tension, the heartbreak, and the triumph, please support our channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more thrilling, emotional, and inspiring stories your way. Leave a comment below and let us know what you think. Do you believe dogs have an extraordinary sixth sense? Share your thoughts and personal stories with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.